This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. In this video, we're doing a great 3D rose cake design. It's broken down into steps so you can skip ahead, rewind, and rewatch as desired. Let's get started mixing our colors. We're going to make 3 colors today. We're using all American style buttercream, and we're going to use the following liquid gel colors: coal black, violet, royal blue, lemon yellow, sunset orange, has a faded label on it, our neon bright pink, and finally, some red. To start with, we're going to make the color for the background of our cake. It's going to be a nice dusty amethyst. So to that end, I have just a little bit of both my black and violet on the lid here. And we're just going to make a really light shade. So we don't need a lot. So we're going to use toothpicks to dab it in. And I find it helpful just to squeeze out a little bit to help me control amounts. I'm going to start with just a few specks of my purple. And then a couple of really tiny ones of my black, just to control that amount. I just want to kind of gray out a little bit, dull that purple. So I've got a little of each of those colors in the bowl, just a tiny touch of both my gray and my black. I want to both my gray and my purple. I want to dull it out just a little bit. I don't want it to be too vibrant, so that black is going to be helpful. But I also don't want to go too gray. And it's very light right now. Always better to start with less color and add more. And that way I can just touch it up however I want to. So I think a little heavier on my purple there, and just a little less on that black. We just want to get to nice light color that'll be the background for our cake. So think kind of maybe almost like little gray stormy skies. Especially if you think about times like sunset where you get really great colors in the sky. It has all those beautiful different hues. Looking good. I think just a little touch more purple. Don't want to go too wild with it. There we go. That's going to be lovely. It's a nice light shade of purple that's got just a little bit of gray into it, so it's not too vibrant. It's not going to stand out, but it's going to be a nice contrast for the color we're going to make for our flowers. Our second color is going to be for our roses, and we don't need a lot because we're just going to make a few full open roses and some buds and half blossoms that we're going to pipe directly on our cake. So we want to make a medium tone kind of peach. So I'm going to start with just a couple of drops of my neon bright pink. I like that it gives you that pink, but also that kind of bright electricness to it. And we're also going to do some orange. And then I want one red, because I want to make a nice deep color. Got 2 in there. We'll see what that does. And I want it to be a little vibrant. I don't want it to really be red, but I want it to have just like a nice little bit of that cool quality that the red gives it. So I'm just going to mix this around, check it out, see where it goes for us, and then we'll adjust by adding some of our other colors. And I think probably just a little more of that bright pink, and maybe one more of my orange should do it. It's already at a nice kind of medium tone, and I don't want to make it too dark, but I want it to be a really great peachy color. So let's just give it 2 more of that pink. 1 more orange. I want it to be almost like a nice, great, like say bittersweet color. One that's kind of between orange and red. Somewhere between bittersweet and a really great medium tone peach. And I think that's where we're landing right now. And this is going to be perfect. This kind of color always gives me a great kind of like fall vibe too. So it's going to be great if you want to make some flowers or some nice little cakes for fall. Our final color is going to be a nice green, and I want to make kind of a forest color so it'll really stand up against the nice medium tone peach we made, that beautiful kind of bittersweet color. So I'm going to use my lemon yellow. Just start with like 2 drops. I want to make a nice kind of similar value shade. I'm going to start with 3 of my royal, if it'll behave and come out on me. There we go. So more blue than yellow, and 1 black. This is a great way to make nice dark forest green kinds of shades. Nice blend of royal blue, yellow, and a little bit of black to help deepen and darken it. Add some of that gray value to it. And you typically want to go more blue than yellow, so you get a nice, cool color. And that's looking beautiful. There's some unmixed color up there on my spatula handle. Just want to get that down, mix it around a little bit. And I might just add a touch more of each. Like maybe 1 drop of each. It's looking good. I think I just want it to be a little deeper. There we go. Wonderful. So let's get this mixed around and we'll check it out. Wonderful. I think that's going to be perfect. It's going to stand up really, really nicely to the color we made for our flowers, but it's also going to pop off of that shade that we made for our background. And I would say the color for our flowers is a little bit deeper in value than this, so those flowers should really be a nice bright punch of color compared to the colors that we've just made for our leaves and the one that we made for the background of our cake. For this project, we're going to use 2 12-inch disposable decorating bags. They're both fitted with couplers so we can change the tips. For our peach, we're using a number 12 tip and a number 104. For our green, we're using a number 5, so a plain round tip, medium size, a number 352, so a V-shaped leaf tip, and also a number 104. Let's review the techniques we're going to use for this 3D rose cake. The first is going to be for actual roses that we'll pipe, and we're going to use a number 12 tip, and this is going to make the cone inside our roses. We want to hold our bag straight up and down, be up off the surface, and we're going to squeeze a dot. So let that frosting balloon out nice and wide and fat, and then pull up slowly while we're still squeezing. When we get to the height we want, we're going to pull away quickly while still squeezing. And that's going to give us that nice little point on the top of that that'll make the cone shape that we can put our petals on to build up our roses. Next, we're going to use our 104 tip to create 2 kinds of petals to make our roses. And the first one is that center petal, and this one is essentially a hold and squeeze. I can't actually demo it here on my tray. We're going to have to do it later on our flower nail, and we'll talk more about setting up the bag in the next section. But the important thing to remember is that we're simply going to hold and squeeze while we turn our nail. And if we have the bag set up properly, and in particular the angle in which we're holding the opening of the tip, because you can see it's directional. You've got that skinny end on one side and the fatter end on the other, and it's almost a little teardrop shape. So we want to make sure we have that oriented correctly. And if we do, all you really have to do is hold and spin, and it'll create a center petal on the top of the cone that we made. The next style of petal are what I call soft arc shapes. And essentially, we're just going to do a nice soft arc. So think about it like a little arch. So we're coming up just a little bit in the middle and down on the beginning and the ends. And if we draw nice and slow and at a good rate, you'll see you get a nice smooth line on the top of that petal. If it's frayed up there, it probably means you either need to squeeze harder, or if that's not possible since you've just started out, turn your nail slower and move slower, and that'll kind of even out any roughness you get on the top of those petals. Next, we're going to do some rose buds, and I'm going to give a quick explanation of those right here on the tray. We're actually going to pipe them directly on the side of the cake, and we have another video that does a great thorough explanation on these as well. So if you want to, you can always check that out. We're going to just do a nice little fan shape and then rock the back of the bag up at the end to end it. And that gives us a little peak or a ridge there. So it's just a matter of kind of fixing the fat end at a point and moving the back of the bag to kind of create that little fan or arc shape for that petal. And then if you finish it by tilting the back end of that bag up, you get this nice little ridge there. And then you can create what I call the rollover petal. All you do is line the opening up so that where the frosting is coming out of your tip meets up with that ridge. And when you squeeze, it's going to catch and roll over. Once it does that, you can pull down and away to finish. And it doesn't look like much from the back, but you can see it makes cute little rosebuds. When viewed from the top or other angles, they look absolutely adorable. For the green, we're going to do a few different details. We're going to make sepals, stems, and leaves. The sepals, we're going to use our number 352 tip, just like we normally would to make leaves, but we're going to do them really, really small. So you just want the back of your bag pointing in whatever direction you want to pull that leaf. So basically wherever you want the point. We're going to have one of the points touching our surface, the other one straight up, and we're just going to squeeze really little, nice, small, and pull away. So you can see that gives us a nice tiny little leaf. So the lighter you squeeze and the quicker you pull away, the more petite they will be. If you hold longer, you'll just create bigger leaves. But basically, we just want to make a little pop of green to come out from underneath our roses to really set off that color, but also to help support and place them on our cake. For our stems, we're going to use a number 5. You could use any similar size number of tips, so think a 6 or a 7, just something nice and big that'll give your line some weight without being too heavy. Probably a 9 or 10 is too big. And for these lines, we're going to be drawing directly on the side of the cake. So we want to set our bag up so that it's at a 45-degree angle. The back of the bag is going to be pointing wherever we're pulling towards. So we're just going to kind of follow the back of our bag. And you can freehand them, but I'll probably trace some little guides on my cake to start with. And we just want to ever so lightly touch the surface with the bottom edge of that tip so that when we squeeze, it connects and we can just pull along the surface. Now, if you really try, you can get them pretty straight and smooth, but I like that roses kind of have knotty, unusual stems, like they kind of have these little bulges to them in some places, and they branch off in fun directions. So don't be afraid to just let it do whatever natural wiggle you want. And the more intentional it looks, kind of the cooler they look. So it gives it a little bit more of a natural feel, which is nice, especially if you're not good at making really straight lines yet. That might be a little hard. Make them more unusual and make that little bit of difference, that little wiggle intentional, and it'll look gorgeous. And it'll give you a nice, soft, nature-inspired vibe to your cakes. We're going to make some cute variegated leaves to go with our roses, and I'm going to use a 104 tip. If you want to do it, you can always do a 102 or 103. You just need a petal tip, and we're going to make a variation on some flat leaves that we've done. So if we're doing the regular ones, back of the bag is going towards our back. We're going to start squeezing, pull up to a point, and then we're going to do the same thing going backwards. So we're just going to go back towards the end. If I want to make them kind of more variegated, if I want the kind of veins to really look like they're standing out, I'm going to give it a little wriggle, just like I would if I were using a 352 tip, where I gently kind of pull the bag back and forth as I'm going, and that's going to build up frosting and really build up lines that are going to look like veins in our leaf. So let's give this a try. It's a little harder on the tray than it is on the nail, but you can see just really moving it back and forth. And then when you're ready, go towards a point, and you can see more pronounced lines there in the side. And I really like the way that pays off. It gives you a nice little detail. And then you just want to go the opposite direction. You can do it in 2 parts. It doesn't have to be all at once. So just line yourself up. Start back there, pull back, and then wriggle the other direction. And it's a little easier on your flower nail where you can really manipulate things and you don't run into the bottom of the tray, but I'll pull them up close so you can see you get a lot more detail, right? There's a lot more of those little lines. It's a little thicker in the center, so it has a little more body to it, and it makes just a nice little interesting touch that's a little more realistic for those piped leaves. Let's do a quick review of how we're going to use those techniques that we talked about when we were talking about making our rose. So our cone, our center petal, and our soft arc petals to build our rose blossoms. And if you want a more detailed explanation and a more detailed tutorial, you can check out our flower series video that we have on making basic roses, because we're doing the same thing here. This is just a nice practical way to practice those and practice using them on your cakes. So we're kind of building on that and doing a nice little lesson to reinforce those. So we're going to quickly go over this. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our number 12 tip. We're going to pipe our cone. We're working on our flower nail, so key things to remember: holding that bag straight up and down, but also holding your nail straight up and down. We want to let that frosting balloon out so we have a nice fat base, and then build it to a nice peak. It doesn't have to be a perfect slope to that line. You really just need it to taper so you have space to build up your petals. And we need less petals at the top and the center and more at the bottom, which is why we want that nice cone or little mountain shape to it. The first petal we're going to put on is our center petal. So after we're done with that number 12, we're working exclusively with that 104, and we're going to switch to that 104 tip, and we're going to hold it so that that tip, the point, is pointing towards 11 o'clock. If we imagine, say, a clock face here, right? Noon is right there, 11 is over there. So it's following or mirroring the slope of the line of the little cone that we made. And the skinny end is up kind of past the top of that peak. That way, when we hold and spin our nail, it encloses itself. If you're holding the point too far down, you're going to get a big opening in the center of the top. So if you find you've got an opening in the center of your roses and that central petal, try sliding the tip up some. It feels a little unsure, might make you a little nervous, like it's unsupported, but I promise it'll pay off, right? You just need to slide it up a little bit and that'll close that center for you. Next, the only thing we're going to do is change really the rotation of that tip. So from pointing across to pointing straight up. So now if we imagine our clock face, it's pointing towards noon, and we're going to take that bottom end of it and slide it down the cone. And then when we pipe our little soft arc petals, they're going to go from a closed center to a straight up petal, right? So we're just rotating the opening of the tip and moving ourselves down the side of the cone every time we do a new layer of petals. For those soft arcs, for this first row, we're going to do 3. So that should kind of fully enclose that center petal. We'll move it down just a little more and angle it out. So think from noon to 1 o'clock is where our little tip opening should be pointing. And that will allow you to nest that fat end underneath the row before. And then you should be able to pull 5 petals. Same soft arc motion. And that should open up your rose. So it'll go from closed to straight up to opening out. Now, if you did a nice tall cone or it's pretty fat, you might need another row. If that's the case, if you've got a fully exposed bottom, go on and do another full row. It'll probably take 7 petals. So you notice as we get wider, we take more petals to fully enclose it. But sometimes, every once in a while, I haven't quite made it big enough for another row. If that's the case, that's totally fine. Not all your roses have to be the same size. Every once in a while, I might just have a small gap at the bottom, and I might put in just the occasional petal. And playing with the height of your cones, making some of them a little bit bigger so you can get 3 full rows in addition to your center petal, is a great way to vary up the size. If you do some of them a little shorter, it might only take 2 rows, and then you can basically make large and medium roses for yourself using the exact same techniques. Now that we've reviewed this, let's pull out our flower nail and give these a practice. Now that we've gone over how to make our roses, let's give it an actual practice. I've got my small 2-inch flower nail out. I have my bag ready with my number 12 tip, and I've secured a little piece of parchment on my nail with just a tiny dot of buttercream. I'm gonna hold my bag straight up and down. I want that tip off the surface so that when I squeeze, my frosting balloons out nice and big. And then after it does that, I'm just gonna slowly pull up until I reach my desired size, and I'm just gonna give it a nice little pull quickly. And that's gonna give me a nice little cone to build my rose on. Let's put on our center petal now. We've got our cone there. We're going to hold it so that our bag is at a 45-degree angle. The back is pointing towards my right shoulder. That's because I'm right-handed. If you're a lefty, just reverse it. You'll be holding in your left hand, and the back of the bag will be pointing towards your left shoulder. You can see the tip opening is resting kind of at the back of the cone. I'm right here, right? So when I'm holding it, this naturally puts it so that I can just lay it so it's resting right there in the back of that cone. I want to make sure that the top of that tip is pointing across, right, towards 11 o'clock. I'm going to make contact with the cone, and so all I'm going to do is hold that in place and spin, and you can see that makes a nice enclosed petal. To finish it, I just do a quick swipe down at the end. So essentially, we're just going to hold there, spin until you make it all the way around, and when you do, pull down to finish. And that makes a nice enclosed center petal for you. I'm going to put on my first row of petals now. My bag is in the same orientation, so 45 degrees, the back is towards my right shoulder, but you'll notice that the tip, instead of laying across, is pointing straight up and down. So that opening is the only thing that changes. This allows us to start underneath the bottom of that center petal, and we're going to pull a soft arc motion as we spin our nail. So you can see that lays on that nice first petal of that first row. And you can see it's pointing straight up instead of being closed the way that first center petal was. We're going to do 2 more of these, and it should fully enclose our center. And there you go. That puts on our first row of petals. For our second row, the only thing we're changing is that we're going to angle that tip opening out. So think towards about 1 o'clock. This allows us now to nest the bottom end underneath that first row. So we're just slightly further down, and we're going to pull that same arc shape. And it should take about 5 of these to get all the way around. And if you run into one of your petals, don't worry. It happens sometimes. You can just gently use the tip to kind of coax them back into place. You can see that pulled us all the way around, and now our flower already looks like it's opening up. If you didn't pipe a very big cone, that might be enough to finish it, but you can see I still have space on mine, so I'm going to go ahead and do another row. For my final row, this third one, I'm going to open the angle of that tip a little more, so we're just rotating it out a little more, moving it further down the cone so it touches the bottom, and just start in between 2 of your petals. And this one will probably take about 7 to go all the way around. You can see I was a little lower down in one spot, so I just had to squeak that in underneath. Don't worry too much about disturbing any of your petals. That always gives it a little bit of nice natural variation. And you can see now it's finished. I've gone all the way to the bottom of my cone. We have petals covering the whole surface, and we have a very beautiful looking rose. It's probably going to take about 3 of these big, nice open ones, these nice full ones to finish my cake. So I'm going to go ahead and pipe 2 more. I'm just going to place them on a tray and pop them in my refrigerator so that the butter and this buttercream is nice and chilled and cold, and they'll be easy to place on my cake. Now let's pipe some leaves. I've got my bag of green fitted with my 104 tip, so we're ready to go, and I just want to imagine a line bisecting this little piece of parchment I've got on my flower nail. I'm still using my little 2-inch nail, and I've just attached a little bit of parchment there. This is a great way to use up some odd sizes if you ever get rectangles. Sometimes I end up cutting weird shapes. And I've got the fat end towards the center of my nail. The skinny end is out, the back of the bag is pointing away from me, and I just want to give it a squeeze and start going. Let that connect and just wriggle back and forth and really build up a nice fat line. You can start rotating the bag and the nail as you get to the end, and then just draw it to a point. And you can see much easier to do this on my nail versus my tray, where I can really use the rotating action of that nail and just gently rotate my bag as well to really create this shape. So now I'm going to start, the back of the bag is kind of off towards 3 o'clock. That's going to line up the opening with that pointy little end we just created. And I'm just going to start drawing a nice little point down. You can see I've rotated my nail a little bit. And then I'm just going to wriggle back the other direction. And the slower you go and the harder the squeeze, the fatter it gets. So you can play with the pressure, less where you want it thinner, more where you want it fatter, and you can really make some nice, great little wriggly lines, and it gives you a great little texture on the outside edge too, which I like for roses, because I feel like they always kind of have those little points on the edges of the leaves. So it's a nice little look that's a different variation from ones we normally make, and it can give you these great big fat leaves. I'm probably going to make anywhere from 6 to 9 of these, and if you feel like this version is too big that we've made with our 104 tip, you can easily do these with any of your petal tips. So think 103, 102 if you want them to be more petite. I'm going to prepare the surface of our cake for our decorations, so we're just going to coat it with that nice kind of dusty amethyst color that we made. And we have a 4-inch round cake we've just iced with white buttercream. You could use either a 4 or 5-inch round for this, whatever works for you, whatever pans you have on hand. You don't even do it bigger, you just need more flowers. So I'm just going to give myself a nice dollop of purple on top, and then just gently use my spatula to work it out past the edges and give us a nice flat light coating on top. And I like to coat my cakes with color after I've already iced them with white. It's nice and easy to do, but it also means you use less food coloring, and the colored frosting almost becomes like fondant where people can eat around it if they want. So it's a nice little touch sometimes for cakes. It's also good practice for your control. Let's just really quick, once we get the top going, to really go around the sides. And anytime you need it, just pick up more buttercream on your spatula. But if your cake is nice and firm, it's going to be easy to layer those colors on top of each other. And it doesn't take very much. You can see just quick few minutes really gets a nice coating on there. Just want to make sure you get any little spots where you're a little thin, even things out. Got some more color here. Just make sure I go over those sides. I don't have any little bare spots there. Can, however, if you want to create a nice kind of muddied, mottled effect, use some of that to your advantage if you want to have some other color showing through. can create a really beautiful, soft fade if you want. But I'm going for a nice, solid finish today. So once I get it on with my spatula, I'm just going to use quickly bowl scraper. I like the flexibility of that. It helps push frosting into any dips. And then my bench scraper, because it's a nice right angle and really inflexible, just to go around quickly and make those sides nice and straight. And if I've got any thin spots or little places where that white is showing through, I'll just put it in the refrigerator for 15-20 minutes, let what I've put on just now firm up, and then I can go in and clean any of that up. But for now, I'm just gonna take my little spatula, my small offset one, and just gently use it to get any excess off the top. It's really easy to do. Just nice light pressure, light strokes, and I start away on that back edge, and it's easy just to sweep across the surface and smooth off the top of your cake. So we've got a really nice covering. Maybe just give it a little touch up. I've got a few little bald spots down there at the bottom that we'll fix up in just a few minutes, but overall, nice light covering, great surface to put our decorations on. We have all of our piped decorations ready to go and chilled, so they're ready to place on our cake, and we just want to put on a few details first. We want to just put them on quickly after they're out of the refrigerator so they stay nice and firm while we're working with them. So we want to prepare the surface with some lines. So I'm just going to take a little toothpick and kind of mark where I want those big, large roses that I did to be at top. And then I'm just going to kind of go off to the side, a little here, a little there, and I'm going to leave some gaps for leaves. And I'm going to do this in 3 places. So when you're doing this, you just kind of want to think about where you want your flowers. And if you want them kind of evenly spaced out, just kind of mark those top edges of the cake so you know, oh, maybe over here, about where to go. Because you don't want them too close together, too far apart, kind of equal spacing. That way visually there's some distance between them and it's easy to tell them apart. And then once we do, we're going to do those nice little wiggly lines that we practiced on our tray. So I've got my number 5 on my green. You could either use a 6 or a 7, just a nice medium-sized round tip. And we're going to have the bag 45 degrees in relation to the cake. And we're just going to kind of point the back of the bag in the direction that we want to go. So I'm going to start here, squeeze, let it connect, and just glide along the surface, wriggle it a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, and just end up there. See, you get a nice little line. And then we're going to go off in a few other directions just to leave space for some buds and some half blossoms. So I'm going to do this in 3 places, so I'll have 3 groupings of those roses. We pulled our tray out of the refrigerator. Our decorations are nice and firm, and as you can see, I piped all my little lines on my cake to get ready. So I have this nice 3 groupings, and we're going to start with placing one of our roses. And I have some of my extra purple buttercream, just a little bit left over from decorating my cake. I'm just going to use my spatula to just kind of swipe a little mound right there. And that's going to allow me to kind of tilt and present that rose so it's kind of facing towards you. And in preparation, we're also going to do some of our little sepals underneath. So they're going to kind of hang out from underneath our rose. So I just want to go in and pop in 3 of those. So just tiny little leaves. And then I've got a nice little surface here ready for one of my roses. So I've also got my spatula ready, and our little flowers are going to be nice and firm, so they should be easy to handle, but you can always keep a spatula on hand just in case you need one. I'm just going to pick that big beauty that we did with you all on camera up and place it right here. And I've got my spatula ready just in case I need any help positioning it or pulling it off. I ended up not needing it at all. Sometimes they might be a little stuck. You might need a little help placing them, and that little flat edge can really do the trick for you. You can see the purple kind of disappears into the background and just acts as a nice little support and helps secure it. You can always add more green to the sides if you want to. So let's go ahead and do that. Just where any of that purple is kind of peeking out, you can kind of see it from the sides. There we go. And then we have a beautiful rose there on top of our stem. Now it's going to be time to add some leaves and half blossoms. And I've got those leaves already out here on my tray. I did a bunch of them with my 104 tip, and you can actually kind of create different sizes with that 104 tip too. They don't all have to be huge. So I just want to get a few of them out and on my cake. So just any tip on your bag, a little dot of buttercream, and you should be able to place those with ease. They're nice and firm. They've been in the refrigerator for a while. So you can see then it's really easy to place those leaves on. You don't even have to worry about piping directly on your cake. And then I'm just going to grab a smaller one. To go over here on this side, and you can see having them in a variety of different sizes means you can really play with the negative space, those little gaps, those little areas to create something beautiful. I also have my 104 tip still on that great, beautiful peach color that we made. And I'm just going to do a few little buds and half blossoms as well. So the buds are just like we practiced on the tray. We want to make sure we make a nice little fan. Rock up, get that nice little nub. We need something for our second petal to connect to, and then just allow it to roll over and pull down. You can see you end up with a beautiful little rosebud. You can finish that off really quickly with your leaf tip and just put on a quick little trio underneath and pull them directly out towards yourself. And that's going to give it just a little bit of depth there. So they're going to pull forward into that space. And then over here, I'm going to add on a half blossom. It's going to be the same as this little rosebud. And I'm just going to add a few extra little petals really quickly to make it look a little fuller. So it's a nice kind of little cheat half flower that you can do on the sides of cakes. So I'm just going to come in here, pipe my fan with that ridge, allow my second petal to roll over, and then I'm going to do some petals, one on this side and one on that side. So you just have to play a little bit with the angle of your bag. And you can see this gives us that look like we've got a nice little bud that's just starting to open, and gives us a nice kind of variety to the size and shape. These smaller ones will hold up on the side of the cakes, whereas if you tried to put one of these flat on the side, it would probably slump over on you. So this should hold up well for presentation. We'll just finish it by giving it a few little leaves under there for its calyxes. And I'm going to clean up my turntables. I got some orange on it. And then I've got some space down in here on both sides where I can put in some more leaves. So I'm just going to pull some of my bigger ones. Little dab of buttercream. And maybe a more petite one. And one of the things that I like about making leaves with my petal tips, like my 104, is that you don't have to make them all the same size. So even using my 104 tip, I made all these leaves using that tip. And squeezing harder will give you big ones. Squeezing lighter will give you smaller ones, so you can just adjust the size by how long you draw it out and how hard you squeeze. And there we have a beautiful little spray of roses on the side of our cake. We've got more decorations. I'm going to go around and finish the whole thing, and then we'll wrap up by showing you the finished cake. And here we have our finished cake. So you can see we have 3 lovely little groupings of roses. We've got some nice leaves on there. Really love the way that beautiful medium tone peach that we made pops off of that nice kind of, I'll call it like a little dusty amethyst color. So you get a nice contrast between those two colors, both in value and from the color itself, since purple and orange are opposite from each other on the color wheel. So it's a nice combination. And then that deep green really reads well against that background color. So it's a nice little combo. Always kind of reminds me of sunset in the mountains where we are. And we've got some nice spacing and nice distance between it, so you can really read all the details. And we've got some great roses up top, and then we also have some half blossoms and buds on the sides, which is nice practice and nice reinforcement of your skills. They're also really easy to work on, piping on the sides of the cake, which means you can pipe all of your complex, harder decorations in advance. Make sure you get the ones you need, you have enough to decorate your cake with, and it really reduces the pressure when you're going to work on your actual cake, since you've already done the hard work of piping those roses and you've already got your leaves ready to go. Making this a really easy design to complete, since all we're doing on the sides is piping some nice little wiggly lines, which are easy to do even if you're bad at piping because they come naturally, and some cute and quick little rose buds that we then also turn into half roses. And altogether, it makes for a really, really lovely design. Try checking out some of our other tutorials. If you've never tried roses before, we highly recommend our video on basic roses. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.